After life itself, there is nothing more efficient than the body. And after that, nothing more efficient than the mind. And after that, nothing more efficient and fun than one's own personal and individual mind, aka true consciousness. After listening to someone talk about activities such as this, a man said, "If I'm understanding you right, I got to ask a question. What would be the fun in living if you didn't any longer have anything to criticize?" And the one who had been doing the talking replied, "That's a very good question and one quite commonly asked." And the man blushed, smiled, and said, "Why, thank you." One man had a theme song. He had a marching song. He had a blues song. He had a song they played whenever he had entered a room. The song was his thoughts. There was once a mysterious explorer who left no records, and everywhere he went, he'd say, "Not you again." A certain anthropologist says he sees the worldwide appearance of drums in all cultures to be man's reflective interpretation of his own heartbeat. I wonder if he will ever get around to looking for some physical basis from which men develop the idea that the patterns being played in their heads constitutes thinking. I guess to say probably not is to state the obvious. But there was a line left here at the bottom of the page after all that, so I figured, why not fill it up with something? Sounds even more like we're talking about the mind, huh? A viewer writes, several programs past, you read a news item that said if you don't recognize that most talk is simply for the purpose of bringing attention to the talker, that you miss the whole point of what most talk is about. Well, I've thought about this a lot. Sincerely yours, etc. Simple fact. You will depend absolutely on life to think for you if you do not struggle to do otherwise. And while it is true that life will look after you in the same way a cattleman looks after a cow, you got to admit that that doesn't sound like the most fun a man might could have. In the same way you can feel stressed and uncomfortably confined in the midst of a large crowd physically, a few experience similar sensations mentally as regards the collective intellectual activity of man. Those involved in such as this do not see the everyday ideas of man as either valid or foolish, but rather as automatic reactions dictated by life, not at all unlike the normal operations of strictly physical functions. The quest for consciousness is not a mere refutation of thought, but rather a new understanding of it, and thus new relationship to it. All in all, could be said that those with that certain hunger are not satisfied to let nature do for them what it turns out to be that they could do for themselves in a much more personal and profitable fashion. What more need be said? Two of a kind, maybe. There was once a set of Siamese twins, and as close as they were, they certainly had much in common. And same as with other people, they also had their own individual interests. Now, one thing about these particular Siamese twins was that one of them seemed to be almost totally in charge of making decisions and directing their lives, and the other appeared oblivious to this and went right on running things. Siamese twins are weird, wouldn't you say? According to a secret scientific study done several hundred years ago and never made public, but which is still valid today, it was determined that 2.73% of all human speech is for informational purposes, while the remaining 97+% was of strictly entertainment value. Now my question is, forget it. A man once approached a certain mystic and said, "I've been listening to you talk about this stuff for a considerable time now, and I have no doubt as to my sincere interest in it. But what I want to know is, when are you going to come right out and explain how one is to go about achieving what you talk about?" And the mystic replied, "That is a most excellent question, and one quite commonly asked." And the man blushed, smiled, and said, "Well, thank you." A man said, "With drugs, all things are possible." And his brain nudged him, "Hey, you better not let your feet hear you say that." Definition time in the city. Excuses. The place you look when thoughts are on break. Definition time in the transitional area just outside of town. Excuses. They're the name for thoughts. Personal denunciation of human nature is like a dead man dickering over his embalming bill. If civilization really was your friend, it'd step in at places like this and say, there are some things that should be left to the big boys. On one world, their leaders say that their legends say that they learned to think and speak by plucking stars from the sky and pasting them in books. If local information really was your friend, it would not try so hard to keep your eyes from the skies of the universal. But there you are. The things of man cannot do, those things that would interfere with man being man as we know him. According to one recent report, the ears do not feed directly or indirectly into the cranial area, but instead funnel all sounds downward, dumping them into the thoracic cavity. And as improbable as this seems, if you think about it, it sure would explain a lot. A man asked a history book, "How much longer can men refuse to realize that there are no cures for imaginary ills?" And of course, it being a book, it couldn't answer. But then again, neither could have a man. For years, one man insisted that he wanted to get on the train. But for years, he'd stand on the platform and stare at the tracks, which precluded the arrival of any conveyance. "Yeah, I know," said the most awakened and enlightened man on this planet over 200 years ago. "Yeah, you've all been reading about it, thinking about it, and yakking about it. And you think that's supposed to prove something. Well, forget it. I can do it too. So there. What do you think now?" Not all who heard him understood what he meant, but all who heard him were greatly disturbed by it. At a secret archaeological dig, a man unearthed a marble fragment on which was said that the only visit to this planet by creatures from another world was the time they landed in your head. A rose looked at a bee and saw sex, survival, and the sinews of life. One parallel history of man says that his present condition of limited awareness is due to his eyes being placed so far from his head. A bee looked at a rose and saw life looking back. Since this one man couldn't arrange his life so as he could go join up with a real mystical order, he made the best of his being stuck at home and adopted a full-time approach, which was reflected in the motto he would silently repeat as he would look intently out his back door. There's something lurking in the bushes. There was once a man who had read extensively on and pondered laboriously about the quest for another stage of consciousness. And finding no immediate external assistance available, he turned inward to his own thoughts. And one day sat down and said to his mind, after all we've been through, exactly what is it that we are absolutely sure of regarding this most perplexing of subjects? And his thoughts responded, a most excellent question, and one not uncommonly asked. And the man interrupted, okay, hold it right there. For he suddenly realized at least what line of effort would not take him any further. Oh no, not tonight's mental health news. If you took away from ordinary men every trace of their feeling that life is headed toward disaster, they would have very little left in the way of feelings. You might care to note that the above piece of news is old as hell, yet few can ever actually hear what it says. And one man's liver said, how come you never have tonight's liver health news? And before I could respond, a leopard went psst and motioned for him to come over where it was. Two guys were talking, and the first one says, where did men get the idea that consciousness consists only of thoughts? And the second guy took a wild guess from thoughts. As they stood on the parade grounds just outside the barracks, one soldier asked another, what does it actually mean to come up through the ranks? And the other one, who happened to be a biologist on the side, replied, just take a look at man. And the first one said, you mean that's as far as it goes? And the other replied, okay, add in thinking. And the first one pressed on, could anything come after that? And the other one pondered this for a moment and replied, perhaps the establishment of a whole new rank through which to come up again. Upon hearing of this episode, one man thought, how long, I wonder, will life continue to tolerate men talking like this before they can do anything about it? I wonder. After years of struggle, instead of becoming enlightened, one man found himself underwater. But not merely underwater, but underwater and aware of it. And it wasn't too long before a little red fish with blue stripes swam up and said, I haven't seen that Buddha guy around in a while. Scientists fret over black holes in space, through which things might prodigiously travel from one time to another. Mystics have a similar interest in the area connecting their stomach to their thoughts. Too much, find they, of an uncontrollable nature occurring here. Tell and show. One night, on the inside of his visor had this reminder inscribed, remember, anyone who offers to help you can't, which also serves the purpose of helping keep himself quiet. Arguing with the prevailing ideas of man's collective mind is akin to trying to swim in hardened concrete. And even if you did make some headway, just consider the toll it would take on your fingernails and knees. One day a man was suddenly so struck, you know, life is the only truly fair merchant. For everything she sells costs men the same price. Nothing. Nothing other than what they imagine they pay. Stopped in the forest, a man asked a tiger, Is the inability to think and speak the only thing that keeps you from falling reflective and speculating on the nature of life? Then quickly added, no, don't answer that. I believe I'd rather not know. When everything costs the same, a bargain can be difficult to identify. How it be, part 103. The closer you are affixed to the collective consciousness of man, the more you will feel a victim of the past. Consider this, then take another look at religion, psychology, and such. In a land where everything is unworkable, something being unworkable is no big thing. That is, of course, if you are aware that everything is. On one world was a race of beings who could stay alive, who could only stay alive by believing that life was covered with warts. Don't ask me what this means unless we find out that those who discovered this planet had their telescope turned backwards. To sail on some seas, the crew is required to sing on the good ship, disapprove. Meanwhile, back on dry land, a man one day thought, if life weren't so big, I don't guess it'd stand for men talking about it like they do. He mulled about this. He mulled about in the same general area for a bit, then added, I reckon the same is true about thoughts and how men pick on them. Them being so large and all, and being able to put up with it and all. And his thoughts thought, boy, talk about your ass kisser. On the good ship, sycophant, sang the faithful crew, whilst life poured out upon them calm seas and steady winds to take them anywhere. Yes, anywhere that it wanted them to go. You know, said a certain mystic turned bootmaker, used in the right way, warts can provide their own interesting touch to the texture and beauty of skins. One king discovered a whole new and bloodless way to defeat his enemies. He stopped thinking about them. Unfair, they cried. Unfair. Life made them cry. There are trails of blood strewn throughout the universe, but which are not recognized as such and are thought to be something else now altogether. A certain inner explorer once noted, the deeper you look into space, the more it looks back at you and unsettles your perceptions of what space actually separates. It still awaits someone to discover the genetics that tie the universe together, same as they do people. And oh yeah, thoughts. Standing on the cliffs of a great ravine, a man so pondered, what else can you possibly say about life after you've seen it head on and said, that's life? And life suddenly said, don't push it, bub. Though it will never make it into the textbooks or minds of men, the simple truth is that man would not be quite the same important creature that he is here if he did not have at least a slightly exaggerated sense of his importance. And for all of you animals watching our show, let me remind you that this works only for humans. Instead of staying all worked up over their redundancy, one man decided to teach his thoughts some new songs. Boy, did he ever get a big surprise. There was once a man who cut himself up into a bunch of little pieces and then mailed himself to different locations all around the country. In this way, he was able to establish himself in multiplicity and, in fact, became a normal, everyday kind of man. The title of this story is, What's Wrong with This Story? Yet another potential problem for all of you problem lovers. If you keep on going and finally realize what the great, secret, mystical quest actually is, it loses all its secrecy, mystery, and illusionary greatness. Ye gad, said a man, just think, left with nothing but what is. The thoughts of each ordinary man are like ships seeking a place to dock, and the thoughts of every other man like docks that won't be still long enough to be used. Dr. Zycott's medical update. What ordinary men never realize, which would conflict with their continued ordinariness, is that life begins to kill a man long before he dies. And I'm not referring to matters physical. End quote. While it would seem that the simple want simple answers, and the more sophisticated, more complex ones, the plain truth is that the human mind is not constructed with any natural desire to obtain answers. Not answers in the sense of something final and conclusive. In fact, if this were the case, they wouldn't be letting men like Dr. Zycott practice medicine. To try and expand the scope of his explorations into the base animalistic instincts of survival, one man swallowed a lion. Turned out that he couldn't tell much difference. One guy's latest summary is that thoughts wouldn't be so bad if they didn't prod men into talking. The more impotent is man in dealing with a matter, the more elaborate will be his dealing. One man kept reminding himself, the one sign you'll never see on life's door is, apply within. There is no within. Can't you get that through your head? It's all everywhere, and you right in the middle of it. One man developed a re-roll machine which would undo his past. Only hitch was that you had to sit there and watch it as it was being rewound and erased. Rumor has it that he sold the design to a neighbor for $14. Tonight's one-liner from the unwritten history of the mystery. The enlightened are simply those who can hear life talking to itself. Travel and the tricks of filmmaking. If you never stop the train, you'll never realize that the scenery passing by is a prop. One nightly order's internal direction was that a man should always be on edge, not from natural causes, but from his own. Metaphorical descriptions of the quest being a journey give a distinct impression of there being a real distance between where one is now and where one wants to be. But what distance of significance is there between a man's stomach and brain? What true separations are there in a man's body and physical functions? None. Everything is integrally interconnected, and it is a telling error to omit the mind from this reality. Little is served in beating up on the menu when you've overeaten, but in the other direction, you're equally foolish not to recognize the mind's natural propensity to lay the blame someplace else when the stomach has misbehaved. No man can call himself conscious who continues to look in all the wrong places. Indeed, it's pushing it to even say he has sight. As that nightly order notes, a man should always be on edge, not from natural causes, but from his own. All of the famous mystical figures of history were not actual people, but the smoky shadows of certain people. The visible residue left after they discovered the truth and exploded. One man used to hold conversations with himself until he realized that they were going nowhere. He then tried to open up communications with the nowheres that seemed to be the unavoidable destination of his earlier talks. Serious question. What the hell do waves mean to a fish? As one man attempted to reason with life, it replied, "Oh, come on, don't make me laugh with my mouth full." Oh, and we received a surprising letter from a viewer. Dear sir, when you speak of all the many things life supposedly said or did, do you really mean life, or are you actually talking about man's thoughts? A surprising letter indeed. If a man keeps talking past the place where even he believes he had anything to say, he'll either start whining or preaching. Lock up your ears, the boogeyman's back in town. One man says that the wisest words he ever heard come from human lips was when his father looked out over life and said, "It's hard to tell who's in charge here." And finally, a man knocked on the door to a mountain monastery. And when an eye appeared in the peephole, the man asked, "Why do you require that everyone therein live in silence?" And the mouth attached to the eye at the peephole replied, "Shut up." And after a moment, the man brightened and exclaimed, "Ah, I see, shut up is a metaphorical message for me." And the voice behind the door replied, "No, I just wanted you to shut up." I know I threatened to drop it, but one more in that ever popular series wherein we were plucking in a non-kill fashion examples out of ordinary, everyday, contemporary affairs and news, trying to get you to consider in our instant instance, instead of religion or education or bingo games, government and politics as an example, an external reflection, a physical example, a projection externally of the collective mind of man. And I was just at the cusp of one last time. And for you people just tuning in, this has nothing to do with politics, government, the penal system. I'm attempting to get you to consider, and not just for the purpose of in some way shabbyfying civilization, trying to demoralize all of man's fine institutions, but to see that they are no more than a reflection of the mind. And that's still not the point, because philosophically, theoretically, ordinary people can go, "Oh, I can hear that, nice metaphor." It's not that. It is the scenery that apparently is passing by the train, that if you cannot detach yourself from it, or as I put in the news item, if you cannot stop the train, you will never, ever realize. Oh, you can say you do. You can adopt the attitude, the idea, metaphorically, but you will never realize that the scenery passing by your train window all of your life is a prop. Better described, I think, in Hollywood terminology, it is or Broadway, it is a flat. It is simply, pictures of scenery, mountains, politicians, history, painted on a piece of canvas, given it their best shot, at some 3D effect, give it a little perspective. But the truth is, they do not really have to do much of a good job. It's not like having to go down with a parallel rulers and using the laws of geometry to actually draw, as we all know, that such as making railroad tracks appear to go in the distance on a flat piece of paper by having them meet at the horizon. It gives, it's known as the illusion of perspective. The truth is, it's a pretty cheap flat, the kind of things that Hollywood was doing before Hollywood moved to Hollywood and was back in New Jersey working for Dr. Edison. The kind of flats they painted, it was you could say a more simpler time if you want to, but it would fool no one. It looked like somebody's brother-in-law that perhaps was not fully mentally developed was given a brush and told to paint mountains. It was just a crude sketch. It was just to give the illusion. Movies were new, but that's a flat. They're on Broadway that you know, as opposed to movies when you see at the opera and you see the whole background of the city of Seville. Hey, even though they might do a better job than some B-grade movie 50 years ago, you know damn well. You know the size of the theater, and you know, no matter what kind of trompe-l'oeil is used to try and fool the eye, you know damn well it's just paint on a piece of canvas there, and it just has the illusion. What I'm telling you, until you can stop the train, you do not realize that the passing scenery of life is a flat. It is a prop, and a poorly painted one. That's what I was trying to get at. A very crude job. But when you stay in that kind of normally distracted state, so-called, as men call it, normal state of consciousness, you don't even notice. And that's not an attack. It's a heartbreaking fact for a few people. The ordinary mind could only take that as being some sarcastic remark, but some of you who know better, it's not sarcastic, it's not funny, it's goddamn bone-chilling. That you know damn well, some of the people hearing this, you know damn well that you can live 30 or 40 years, you've done it with no problem, and you did it staring. You might as well have been sitting on a train doing 90 miles an hour, and all except minute, just very brief moments here and there, it's like your face is just pressed up against the glass, as they would show it in a movie, like someone daydreaming, worrying about a problem they just left, worrying about a problem down at their destination, reminiscing, maybe they're about to do fishbacks in their head. All right, flashback. But you know the look, it's just somebody staring out, deep in reverie. Not deep in reverie. That's a man's ordinary state. But what I'm telling you is going by, and there you sit, it might as well be on a Hollywood soundstage. It's not actually a train compartment. As you know, it's just a cutaway, and there's little benches there, and it's on springs. The machine makes it bounce up and down, and behind the train windows is this, not infinite, as a matter of fact, if you notice. They're getting a little bit better, but it's just a passing scenery if they're going through the desert. It's only perhaps, I don't know, 50 feet long or 20 feet long, and it's just on this endless loop, and it keeps playing by because all you have to do is notice, and it's the same down mountains go by, the same piece of cacti or cactus, and it keeps going by. It is a beautiful, I don't know whether that's an allegory for life or life's an allegory for that, but who cares? But that is the state of it, and you will never notice it until you can stop the train, and I'm just hoping that everyone understands stopping the train is not even symbolic, it is truly metaphorical, that I'm talking about something else. But, back to where we were. Using society, what appears to be life out there, the passing scenery, that to the ordinary mind, the reason I keep bringing up such as this is not to try and a value of some faith or belief or some particular attitude toward the external world, for instance, in this case, politics. It's not that. It's to see that your consciousness, your whole inner life, is inseparable from the passing scenery. And it's a prop. Except if you never can stop the train, if you never look at it, it's absolute insanity, as I always admit freely, rhetorically, almost every night, that it is absolute insanity for me to try and tell, if I were to try and tell an ordinary person that politics or religion, but let's say just politics nowadays, keep it out of the clerical area. If I said politics is just an illusion, I mean government's an illusion. Of course all I'm doing is localizing civilization itself. If I said it's just an illusion, And they go, well, maybe some kind of interesting symbolism you're using. And I say, screw symbolism. I'm telling you the truth. It's scenery. It's a prop. It's painted on a flat. It might as well be non-existent. You understand? Any ordinary person, if they were convinced that I was being serious, they would immediately take me extremely unserious. Because to the ordinary mind, it's insanity. Because it is still tied to the passing scenery. And until you can stop it and look at it, it is absolute futility to tell someone that what you believe you're perceiving, your consciousness of life is not well founded. If you start off and you try to be somewhat, if you try to walk softly if you were to begin such a conversation, they would immediately assume that you're about to criticize some aspect of their thinking, certain aspects of their perceptions of life. And if you said, no, I'm not here to criticize your perceptions of life, because let's assume I don't even know what they are. And they go, well, I was going to point that out. And I say, but that's the point. It doesn't matter, because I'm not criticizing your perception. What I'm criticizing, if you want to call it that, what I'm trying to point to is that your perceptions are inseparably tied to the passing scenery. The passing scenery is your perception. Life is thinking for you. The scenery, if you want it this way. The government is thinking for you. And they go, oh, nice, so you're an anarchist. See, and they missed it. No, I don't mean the government. I mean you're letting the passing scenery continue to run what you call consciousness. At any rate, the example I was going to pull out, I saved the worst for last because, well, the most tortuous, if you're only trying to listen to your ordinary mind, which should be tortured sufficiently already. Society is always attempting, civilization and society is always attempting to protect itself as it should. It has the same instinctive drive for self-preservation that any feral, non-thinking animal has. And you might note that the planet as a whole is becoming more and more civilized, becoming more and more homogenized, but it's becoming more and more civilized. There's still certainly areas on the planet that are less than the average level of civilization, but then again there are areas within civilized areas that are uncivilized. In other words, if you pick the most civilized city on earth, there are neighborhoods in that city that only a fool would go walking in. We all know that. But taken as a whole, you can see it. And part of the way you can see it is the shift, and it's dramatically picked up again. I'm not here predicting this or that, but I can tell you safely, as long as this planet's alive, it continues to, as ordinary minds would have it, as they would call it, it continues to progress, continues to evolve in a positive manner. It's not falling apart. If it falls apart, it'll fall apart and all bets are off. But it is now continually progressing. And one way to see it is, what I was going to point out, is that governments are becoming more and more alike. The attitudes of people on opposite sides of the world, people that ordinary mind considers to be of such diverse cultures, as to be almost incompatible in any political sense. Well, for instance, right now, it's easy to see. I'll put it to you this way. It's just the way it happens to be now. The whole world right now is turning gradually and increasingly, the speed picks up though, into the United States. And those that are, and they want to. Governments all over the planet right now, and I remind you again, this is not, it really has nothing to do with the United States. We just happen to be staying here talking, and we're in the place. We're at the cutting edge, the front of the parade. That all over this planet, there are governments now in what ordinary minds would call a state of transition, going from like tyrannical one party or one man rule, that all over the planet, even places that still under the direction of one family or one leader, they have their hands full. They are continually confronted with college students wearing Levi's, listening to rap, wearing caps backwards, wearing Raiders jerseys. You suddenly, if you watch the news, it'll show 12-year-old kids that suppose the news is about the trouble, and they'll pick out some fairly obscure country, I won't name one, but a country, let's say, in the Far East. Their language, their culture, their look seem as far removed from us as possible. And it's being ruled by an army being ruled by a general or some staff of generals. They've been in power since some coup, and maybe they'll fall into free elections. They'll try it for a while, and it goes back to a coup. But right now, let's say it's back under tyrannical rule, and the reporters will some way track down a band of rebels that are really getting in trouble. And you can count on it. It wasn't a joke. They'll find the rebels out there, and they'll have on some camouflage, this or that. But there'll be all kinds. There'll be the Lakers jerseys on, Mets hats, and you'll hear the radios playing, and they're out there in the middle of the jungles, out in Southeast Asia, and now you listen, and it's Boys to Men, or whatever happened to MC Hammer, Salt and Pepper. They're listening to American rap music. They're smoking Marlboros. You see just cans everywhere, Buds, Coors, and they'll get them to translate and say, what's the greatest thing that you want to do when you overthrow the government? They don't say anything about whole free elections, this and that. They go, I want to go to New York. I want to go to Los Angeles. I want to move. I'm simply trying to say the external projections of man's consciousness is becoming more and more homogenized, which I threw in the other night that nobody seems to give in particular notice, that's part of what television is doing. It's not just the content of television, as it is now so worldwide, it is having a leveling effect, a homogenizing effect of bringing, it's by no means anything absolute, but it is increasingly putting men's brain waves in sync, in something resembling sync. And it's not, see, people miss the point. It's now the most popular television shows throughout the world. In the poorest of countries, it's reruns of I Love Lucy or The Honeymoon or something, 60 years ago. Things they're either stealing and bootlegging, or they can rent them, I'm sure, legitimately. The station, I don't know, for $1 a day or $1 per showing. But there it is, you have people that cannot even speak the language. Let's go back to the jungles, my fictitious country in Southeast Asia. You'll see them with little portable, Sony generators running. They have a little Panasonic TV. And you look down and what are they watching? Films like they got somewhere of speeches of Chairman Mao. You'll look down, it'll be I Love Lucy playing there on the TV set, and they can't understand a word, but they're all gathered around looking at it. Now you can, if you're an ordinary mind, you can make all sorts of unsatisfactory observations about that. The easiest one nowadays, it seems to be, that someone would look at and say, well, and they just bypass what's going on. That is, that there sits someone who cannot speak the language. Groups, faithful, and they're sitting there staring at this TV show, and they go, and they're moving, and their heads will do things in common. You'll watch it, all these little soldiers squatted down watching the set, and they've already determined no one can speak English there, not a word. And you'll see them though. The camera does, nobody's making much out of this, but if the camera sits there for a second, if you'll watch them, the same as, say, in a theater here in America or in any country where the audience can speak the language of that which is taking place on the screen, the crowd moves. They'll laugh at the same place, not everybody, and they'll react the same way when something happens. The hero's suddenly in dire danger, and it's like the whole audience. And here it is, people who cannot speak the language, who do not know, as far as we can tell, what's going on in I Love Lucy. But if you see a little semicircle of them there, their heads will move, they'll react in the same way to what's going on, whether they understand it or not, because the content is not important. Only the TV critics. And about the best anyone would make of that, as I said, they'll bypass, as always, what's going on right in front of their face, or the most interesting question is like, what the hell are they doing? And then you find out it's not just one time. It's not like they just got a TV and it's the first time they ever saw one, like real Stone Age people trying to poke a Polaroid picture and blink, it's alive. No, they find out that they've had TV sets there for the last 10 years. And you say, and you mean every afternoon they stop? Oh yeah, they stop the war. They will not miss I Love Lucy or whatever their favorite. And you go, they've been doing this for 10 years, yeah? And none of them understand English, not a word. Now you would think anybody with anything resembling a so-called intellect, any reporter, any social scientist, a viewer who saw this, you would think, wait a minute, what in the goddamn hell is going on here? If there's any comment to be made, if somebody brought it up, say on in a public forum. And somebody said, you realize that we have now rebels over there supposedly fighting for freedom, and they're knocking off every afternoon for at least 30 minutes. Every afternoon in the middle of their righteous rebellion against that tyrannical dictatorship over there, they're knocking it off to sit down and watch 50 or whatever year old reruns of I Love Lucy. And they can't even speak the language. And so the hush falls over the public forum where this discussion is going on. It's like, what in the hell are we going to say about this? We're experts. The cameras are on us. The audience is here. And finally, this is the best they can come up with. As always, they'll turn their eyes directly away from a simple, obvious area that you would think anyone with any intelligence, anybody with any intellectual vitality to them would go, that's the damnedest thing I ever heard about. Wait a minute, I got to think about this. No. The silence falls over the forum, and what they're all thinking is, God, I hope they don't call on me to say something. And usually, the way life works, life will not let a decent set of people out in public in suits and ties, life will not normally let them chagrin to death. And so finally, life will motivate, some guy will go, all right, and if everybody's relieved that one of their numbers is going to say something, he said, all right, it's not my job. It's not my calling in life to just kick around television. But I can't resist pointing out, there it is, a developing country, them needing new resources, needing the freedom to vote, needing a free economic model there. And look what television, look what us in the Western world, look at the havoc, the evil we have wrought. We have those people who should be out fighting for their rights, their liberties. We have them sitting there hypnotized, watching something that is meaningless. And everybody feels greatly relieved, like, as long as you kick around at life, kick along with the activities of man, that will always stop an extremely awkward silence. And so they pick on television. And still no one goes, wait a minute, that's all well and good, but I want to know what the hell those people are doing sitting there for the last 10 years watching this thing faithfully, their eyes glued to the screen, and they got no idea what's going on. Back to where I was. There's a fairly common phrase now about the world is a smaller and smaller place and all that stuff. The world's no smaller than it ever was, and of course they think they're meaning it metaphorically. What is smaller, and smaller is not the correct term, the best term would be the mind of man. What they're attempting to say is the consciousness, the collective mind of man is becoming smaller. But that's not the best way to put it. The collective mind of man is becoming more alike, is becoming more homogenized. So what I was trying to get at was you also have reflected specifically in governments the transition now of probably, not a statistical expert, but probably a greater percentage now of any time in history of identifiable separate governments on this planet, that more of them have been, quote, freely elected by the people. The percentage probably, without a doubt, than any time in the history of this planet. You also have going along with that, it's just reflective of this. And it's always, it's up and down, it's not an absolute march that suddenly X years from now that everyone will be under the auspices of a Western-style republic. But it is simply that the world is becoming more and more one collective mind. Identifiably so. That is why people now sing in other parts of the world in the jungle that if they could get out any English words and you said, what is your goal in life? Los Angeles, Los Angeles. Or what is your favorite, what do you consider to be the most important cultural or artistic part of your life? And if they had enough English, they go, I love Lucy, I love Lucy. And you could laugh at that, but it's not. You're missing the point. But what I was really trying to get at, thank you, is governments, not just governments, but the judicial system, the laws of the various peoples around this planet are becoming more and more civilized. Again, Western Europe and the United States is at the front. That is, we are the most lenient. And it's not right or wrong, I'm just pointing it out, which is part of the homogenization, part of the gradual civilizing of the whole planet. That you have now even increasing international attack on those countries left who have harsh judicial systems. For instance, the strict fundamentalist countries who are still operating under the eye for an eye, where they will still cut off a thief's hand. This is less and less acceptable in times past, just in your lifetime, most of you. Such activities in that in foreign countries on the other side of the world with different cultures and different religious bases, other parts of the world, for instance, Western Europe or here, it was just like a curiosity, the kind of thing that they'd stick in a movie or a TV show like, boy, you think the rest of the world's not crazy? Look at this. And people go, ooh. And it was nobody's business. Nobody cared. Why does it matter if people on the other side of the world living in huts or people who do not even have color TVs? Why do we care if they have that kind of draconian forms of punishment for crimes against property? It is becoming more and more tolerant. I'm getting to it, believe it or not. Thank you. Again, let me, before I get into the real heart of it, remember things go up and down. It's not a direct line that is going this way, it's headed in that way, because it's always headed that way. But it staggers. The parade wanders around parts of the parade itself, inside the parade, certain sections. They'll get ahead of other sections and they'll stop. Then they'll get overthrown. They'll trip. It's almost like they'll take us time out and stop for 5 years. They just stand there. And they may even stagger backwards. There's no doubt about it. The parade keeps going, but inside the parade, small groups. If it was a marching band, the whole band keeps going, but at any particular time, the first 3 chairs of the flute section can not only stop, they begin to go backwards. And the brass, the trombones, the tubas, the drum section, they'll still go past the parade. If you're looking at it, it's still going ahead, but in its midst. And maybe for a while, the French horn players, their heads begin to ache and they stagger sideways. It is, to go back to the United States, Western world, our attitude toward criminal behavior now is so far ahead that it's so different from the majority, population-wise, on this planet, and to some people here in the country, it is looked at as being too liberal. Everybody knows the continuing condemnations of the so-called revolving door judicial system. The people nowadays, not at all like when I was a child, by God, if you even spoke up, if you talked back to a teacher in high school, the principal would bring you in and give you a thrashing. And nowadays, every day in this great country, every day, 2 teachers in our public school systems are assaulted. And every 3rd day, 1 is killed by a student. My God, what's happening? And all they do is take them in and give them a talking to, put them through 2 or 3 days of psychological evaluation, and send them back in class. And if it's not that, it's murderers and rapists. And they go to jail and they'll give them a 10-year sentence, which is not enough to start with, but then they'll go serve 3 months, they turn them loose again. All right. In the midst of us, right here, being, you just have to accept what I'm saying, that that's not necessarily the final word, but that is advanced compared to those kind of extremely trying and harsh laws, such as a thief after 2 convictions loses his hand. There's no appeal, that's just it. If a court in many countries, some countries still left in the Middle East, 2 times caught a thief, your hand's gone. There's nothing else to say. You go before a judge, he hears the evidence, and he says you're guilty, that's it. No appeals, no probation, they cut your hand off. 3rd time, they cut off your other hand. Compared to that, just simply take it, that we are advanced. We are what the world will be tomorrow. And again, that's not the end of it, but it's how all of them will someday be, and then we'll all be somewhere else. So right now, in the midst of the most liberal, the most lenient, the area of the world most given to the attempt at rehabilitation, not merely punishment, because now the collective mind of man in this part of the world has decided that punishment will not work. It does not deter crime. What we have got to do is re-educate, rehabilitate. So now in the midst of this, even in the midst of our area of the parade, it's up and down, There are now voices reacting to it, and have been for a number of years now, saying that we have gone too far. Too far, too far. And so now one of the hot topics for the last few years have been congressmen, governors of certain states coming up with this idea. As some of you may know, it's been, for a while, it was fairly common in most states in this country that they had, concerning certain felonies, a 3-time loser law. And it was almost, there has been common law throughout some parts of Western Europe anyway, that it was looked at kind of historically that if a man is convicted 3 times of a serious crime, he's almost considered unredeemable, irredeemable, not capable of being rehabilitated. And many states had 3-time loser laws that you would go to prison, no parole. It is now, back through one of the swings in the midst of it, that one of the most controversial hot topics is now 2 strikes and you're out. That is a reaction to the perceived liberal interpretations and liberal activities of our judicial system that now certain states have instigated, and others are candidates for the gubernatorialship of many states now, that is one of their planks for election. One of their promises is they will enact a 2 strikes and you're out. That forget all this stuff about 3 times. That you get convicted twice and you go to jail. All right, listen to me right quick. After all this time, I'm not saying this, but now listen. It's one of these things again that if that direction is the way it should go, here's the way it should be. It should be 1 strike and you're dead. If indeed society and civilization were trying to protect itself, because it has now quite adequate, more than adequate statistics showing that rehabilitation does not work. So if there was but now I'm not talking about going backwards to the countries I already mentioned, it would be at the forefront for someone to stand and say, wait a minute, rehabilitation doesn't work, and their slogan would be, and even forget this 2 strikes and you're out, it's 1 strike. And then they come up with all the cries. Remember, I'm just pointing this out. They come up with the cries about, well, we can't keep building prisons because it costs more to put somebody in prison. It costs more to the state than it does a college education. If we convict a man and give him life with no parole, the citizens will end up spending $5 million in his lifetime, more than most of us will make, and we're paying to keep him in jail and to feed him, give him free medical. Somebody, if society was really being pushed directly in that way, without the kind of staggered and back and forth and swings, where somebody would come up with a 1 strike, you're out. That is, you get a fair trial and have all crimes, any what's considered felonies, serious property crimes, and any crime against people, rape, assault, then you're convicted of it, you're a dead man. They shoot you. You save all the taxes. I mean, why keep them there? They have adequate proof, statistics, evidence that there is no such thing as rehabilitation. So if a man's convicted of a serious crime, give him a fair trial, plenty of publicity, an open courtroom. If he's found guilty, kill him. Next. The motto of someone running should be, don't dicker with them, kill them. Now, if we got 1 second left, back to that this is not about government. It's not about society or civilization. It's about a man's thoughts. There is the way a man who understands or got some conception of what thought is about would deal with them. You cannot rehabilitate them. You can't give them 2 chances. You can't give them 3 chances. Don't dick around with them. Kill them. 1 strike and you're out. If a man if anybody, here's what I'm talking about, a thought come in your courtroom, come to your attention more than once, of course it'll happen, but it comes to your attention more than once and it annoys you. There you are trying to be a fair man, a judge. In fact, better than that, you're trying to be more conscious. And this thought keeps coming back in the courtroom. They brought him in again. And you'll sit there, if you're a lenient, liberal, passionate, compassionate, ordinary thinking person, psychologically inclined, religiously inclined, you tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. Try to work with them. Like the man tonight, he decided rather than get all worked up and say steamed up about his thoughts being so redundant, he decided, hell, I'll teach him something new. Boy, did he ever get a surprise. The same way as judges saying, well, now, I hope you've learned your lesson because I could sentence you to 20 years, but I'm going to put you on probation. I hope you learned your lesson. Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Oh, God, have I. 2 days later, he's back. The judge says, hadn't I seen you before? Hadn't you been here before? This is getting redundant. Don't dicker with them. Kill them. It's a brand new policy, 1 strike. One strike, and you're out. Show up here before me. Run through my mind again. Annoy me about one more time. Of course, here is part of these. You might find sardonic, shaky floor of all this. Come before me again. See, here's the problem. Are you intelligent? Are you alert enough to even realize, God damn, I've thought this thing 100 times, 1,000 times. I don't even want to think how many times. When you're staring and you're pressed at the train window, not knowing it's all a prop and it just keeps going by, you tend to lose track. Yeah. You don't notice. I keep seeing that same damn mountain painted there. It's the same. There's only 4 or 5 mountains. They keep running it by me. Once you realize it, then you can institute that kind of austerity move toward your own mind, toward thoughts that keep showing up. Of course, you're really good, as I said, would be the one strike and you're out. A thought gets in your mind, in your courtroom, enough to annoy you, which will annoy a good judge. You're sitting there trying to sleep. That's the reason a person wants to be a judge. Take it easy. Get a salary, sit there, and don't do anything, and suddenly somebody says, Your Honor, somebody got a problem. For a good judge, that's enough. As soon as they wake him up and said, hey, we got a problem. If you knew what you're doing, you don't even wait to hear what the charge is. You say, hang him. That's it. Did it? Oh, my. That's the last of those.